Brothers DJ Mr. Byrd here for a very special Code Extra live at Rhode Island Comic Con. And I am in the presence of greatness. Greatness. The legendary John Romita Jr. How you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all. I don't see anybody, but I know you're seeing me.
Thank you so much. So you grew up in the business of comic books. You were surrounded by John Romita Sr., possibly Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, like so many others. Like, what was it like just being around that greatness on a daily basis?
As a young guy, it was, to me, it was a marvel. Very novel, and it was easy to talk to other people about it because, wow, your father's a cartoonist, and you know Stan Lee. And then as I got older and became an artist, it became very intimidating because you watched one of the greatest artists I've ever met in my life is my father. Then I get to meet Jack Kirby and John Buscema. And then you realize you can never be as good as that. However, it works to my advantage. Now, it's only self-imposed, but then you got a goalpost to try and reach for, and it makes you a better artist. I'll equate it with LeBron James' son may not ever be as good as his father. Doesn't mean he can't be a superstar in his own right. Correct. And he gets to play with his father, which is historic. Well, I felt the same kind of affinity that I may not ever be as good as my father, but doesn't mean I can't strive for it and get to be better and always strive to get better. Self-imposed. That's all it was. He was always supportive of me.
Right. So, like, who were some of your biggest influences, within that circle?
The three guys I mentioned: Kirby, Buscema, Romita Sr. But I had guys, illustrators, J.C. Leyendecker and the Wyeth family, Gibson as an illustrator. Those kind of illustrators I saw, because my father insisted on getting a generalized education. I don't want you to be a cartoonist. I want you to be an artist. And then when you decide what you want to do, I want you to go to school for it. I majored in advertising illustration at college. Okay. He said, you cannot just strive to be a cartoonist. I want you to be a fine artist, literally and figuratively, and then decide that you want to be a cartoonist. He says, don't do what I do. And obviously I didn't listen to him, but he was very supportive as long as I got a general education as a fine artist. And I did my best.
And obviously you did, making a name for yourself. Now you worked on millions of books with many different writers. Who were some of your favorites that you worked with over the years?
Writers?
Yes.
Oh man, Frank Miller, Mark Miller, J. Michael Straczynski. I got to work with Stan Lee, Chris Claremont. Oh my God, Scott Snyder, Jeff Johns. I worked with Neil Gaiman at one point. I got a chance to work with, yes. I got to work with some of the greatest writers in the business. I'm very, very lucky. And they made me better artists just because of the challenge of working with them. Even the less known writers that I've worked with promote challenges to me because they have a different way of looking at things. 10,000 characters fight 10,000 characters all at once. After I'm done cursing their souls, it's a challenge and it makes me a better artist.
Okay, so you've done so many covers. What were some of your favorites that you worked on that you looked at and said, you know what, I did that, that's me?
Issue 600 of Spider-Man. It's a double spread of Spider-Man swinging across. The background is all blacked out buildings with the windows showing, and he's in his blacked out. You don't see any blue. It's just the red against all the windows. And it was Scott and I worked on it, and it was one of the greatest accomplishments because it was such a puzzle to solve beforehand. It's issue 600 of the Amazing Spider-Man. And it's
Scott Hanna.
Scott Hanna was, yeah. Scott Hanna worked as the ink artist.
I actually just had you sign and grade that.
That's right.
That just came out, a couple of years?
No, issue 600, it's longer than a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
But that cover with the buildings all blacked out and he's swinging across it, and you don't see any highlights in the costume, no blue highlights. It's all blacked out. And it's against the windows, and you can see the figure against the windows. And it was a great puzzle to solve, but it's one of my favorite covers. I think it's my favorite cover of all time.
Wow, and that's speaking from a lot.
Actually, my favorite cover is the 9/11 issue, all black. You don't see any of my artwork. That's how great the cover was.
And that was actually that was just a good book in general too.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, and now what was your favorite characters to draw? I know some people get a little tired drawing this one all the time. What is that one that you just say, oh, I get to do another one of this? I'm on it.
Daredevil.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, what is it about Daredevil?
It was the first superhero I saw my father draw as a kid. I was 6 years old. And the specific cover was Daredevil number 12. It's got Kazar up here in the trees, looking down at Daredevil, surrounded by all these bad guys. And I came up in the middle of the night crying from a nightmare, and he said to me, "Come here, look at this." "Oh, Dad, what are you doing?" And he said, I suddenly was no longer crying about the nightmares. I was 6 years old, and he explained to me he hadn't slept in 2 days trying to meet the deadline. He says, "This is this is Daredevil. He's a superhero." Yeah. He says, like you saw Batman and Superman at the barber shop. In the barber shop, there was always comic books for the kids to sit. He says, those are the same kind of thing. Only this guy is going to beat up all these bad guys, and he's blind. What? And from that moment on, he said, I sat down and started drawing on the floor of the attic.
That's amazing.
And that moment, and he gave me that piece of artwork because he knew that was the moment that I wanted to become an artist just like that.
Oh, okay. So what's the biggest misconception about being a comic book artist?
That you're not an artist.
Oh, really?
Because they label us cartoonists. When I was in college, everybody was a fine artist. They wanted to paint the bloody eye, the bleeding, emotional, symbolic. And I wanted to do realism. And the professors would say, "Romita, smoke a joint. You're too tight. Don't do cartoons. Do paintings." I want to be an illustrator. And they called me a cartoonist derisively. And now I'm an artist, as opposed to, for instance, the Japanese artists, the anime people, were always revering, the Japanese people revered illustrators, cartoonists. In America, we were kind of looked at, so you make a living doing this, huh? Yeah, you know what I think about you right now. Now it's come full circle. Now illustrators, cartoonists are fine artists. But the misconception early on was they didn't think of you as a real artist.
So as we wrap this up, what are you working on next that you can actually tell us?
I can work on Spider-Man and tell you about it. Still working on Amazing Spider-Man. It's still fun. And I've always said it's better than having a real job.
Yeah.
And there are some creator-owned projects that I can't tell you about, but I am working with some great writers on ideas that I've come up with and ideas they've come up with. And as long as I have 24 hours in a day, I can draw 20 and sleep 4.
There we go, man. But thank you
Sleeping's overrated, trust me.
Yeah. But thank you very much, legend, the legendary John Romita Jr.
Thanks.